The wind was soft that evening, the kind that moves your scarf and seems to touch your cheek like a gentle hand. I stood outside my son's house, looking at the glow of string lights in their small backyard. Laughter and light music slipped through the walls like warm air escaping a door that was almost closed. I held a small cake wrapped in a towel. I had not been invited. My son was on a plane again. He'd flown somewhere again. If we were sitting together right now, maybe at a kitchen table with a cup of tea, I would tell you this story in a quiet voice. Before I begin, I want to ask something small, from one heart to another. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps me feel that I am talking to friends, not to the empty room. I remember standing there with the cake pressed to my chest, as if the warmth of it could steady me. I could hear a child laugh inside, that bright little burst that sounds like a bubble popping. I thought about knocking. I thought about turning away. I did not know which would hurt less. I told myself many things in that short minute. Maybe they forgot to invite me. Maybe it was just a quick gathering and I had misunderstood. Maybe they needed a night of their own. I kept breathing slowly, the way my husband used to remind me. "Let the wind carry the heat from your chest," he would say. I looked up at the evening sky and whispered, "I'm trying." My son had sent me a photo from the airport earlier, a cup of coffee and a window full of clouds. He wrote, "Back late Sunday, Mom, love you." He'd flown somewhere again. I was used to that by now. I told myself, as I often do, that this is what work looks like for him. But being outside that door, while the house held laughter I could not share, felt different. It felt like a small cliff I had not seen until I was standing at its edge. I stood there a little longer, my scarf brushing my chin, my fingers firm on the warm towel. The wind felt like an old friend who did not ask questions, only stood with me. This is the story of how I became the woman outside the door, and how I learned to love without losing myself. If you will stay with me, I will tell it slowly, with care. And maybe, by the end, we will both breathe a little easier. After my husband passed, the house felt too big. His shoes still sat by the door for a while, as if he might reach for them any minute. I would run my hand along the edge of the table and feel the small scratches we had put there over the years. The silence was heavy at first, like a blanket laid over everything. I learned to fill that silence in simple ways. I swept the floor each morning, the soft sound of the broom like a heartbeat. I put the kettle on and watched the steam bloom, then fade. I said small prayers in the kitchen, just a few words like "thank you" and "help me." I kept his photograph on the shelf in the hallway. Sometimes I paused there and spoke to him like he had just stepped into another room. "I'm doing my best," I would say. "Please watch over our boy." The radio kept me company, low and gentle, turning the rooms warm again. My son, Aaron, was kind from the start. When he was small, he collected fallen leaves and carried them home to show me, as if each one was a little treasure. When he got older, he helped Mrs. Green next door carry her groceries without being asked. He always came back with stories, and that soft, open look in his eyes. He was not perfect, no one is, but he had a way of apologizing that was real. "I'm sorry, Mom," he would say, after a teenage sigh or a slammed door. Then he would hug me, and the air would ease. I learned to let some things pass, to trust the good roots we had grown. He got his first job at a small office in town. He came home with a paper bag and a smile. "I got the job, Mom," he said, standing in the doorway like a boy again. Inside the bag was a simple mug with the word courage on it. I rinsed the mug and set it on the counter. "You did it," I told him, and meant so much more. He lifted me in a hug that made me laugh and pretend to scold him. "Put me down, Aaron," I said, and then I kissed his cheek. I met Lily on a quiet Sunday. He brought her for tea, and she held a small bouquet of daisies she had bought herself because, as she said, "I didn't want to come empty-handed." She had tidy hair pulled back with a clip and kind eyes that watched the room a little, the way careful people do. She offered to help with the dishes after we ate, even though she did not have to. We talked about simple things, the best way to keep herbs alive on a kitchen window, the trick of getting rice not to stick. "Turn off the heat and let it rest," she said. I liked the calm in her voice. I could see my son looking at her like he had found a quiet lake to sit beside. Their wedding was small, close, and warm. We had strings of tiny lights, and someone played a gentle song on a guitar. There was a candle for my husband on a small table with a photograph, and we all looked at it for a moment. I kept busy, handing out napkins, picking up plates, staying helpful and quiet. When I hugged Lily, I said, "You look beautiful." She smiled and squeezed my hand. During the vows, I felt both full and empty, full of joy for them, empty in the place where my husband should have stood. They moved into a small house not far from mine. I could walk there in 15 minutes if I took my time. I tried to keep a good distance. I sent a text before I visited. I brought soup sometimes, but I also learned to go home with the empty container and not stay unless asked. They painted their kitchen a soft green. "It will feel like spring all year," Lily said. I sat on a stool and kept them company while they worked, handing a damp cloth to wipe away a drip. "Let me watch the brushes," I offered. "You two rest." I went home feeling light, as if a new thread was tying our homes together. The day they told me they were expecting, I felt my heart grow in my chest. "Mom," Aaron said, and he looked younger than I had seen him in a long time. "We're having a baby." Lily's hands were folded, and she was blinking quickly, like she did when she was excited. I baked bread that day and knitted in the evening. Tiny socks, the kind you can put on 2 fingers. I took them out and held them up and smiled at the quiet room. I said to the photograph, "We are going to be grandparents," and I laid the socks beside it like a secret offering. They set up the nursery with a small crib by the window. The light there was kind in the morning. I washed the soft clothes with fragrance-free soap and hung them carefully. Folding them felt like folding hope, slow and sure. As the weeks went on, Lily and I sat together sometimes, just the two of us. She sipped tea and pressed her palm to her belly. "I am scared sometimes," she said softly. "I don't know if I'll be good at this." I told her, "You already are, just look at the way you love this child and the way you prepare." When the baby came, the whole world seemed to tilt toward him. His name was Noah. He was small and warm, and he smelled like milk and new sheets. I held him at the hospital and whispered, "Welcome, and you are loved," and a quiet thank you to Lily. The early days were a soft blur. I helped with meals and laundry. Soup simmered on their stove, and bottles stood like little soldiers by the sink. "Thank you, Mom," Aaron would say, rubbing his eyes. Lily would add, "Thank you," and touch my arm. I tried to ask before I did anything. "Can I wash these?" I would say, holding up a dishcloth. "Do you want me to start a load?" Sometimes I forgot and folded a cardigan that I found on a chair without asking first. If I noticed, I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I should have asked." They would smile and say it was fine. Some nights were long. Once at 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. "Can you come?" It was Lily. I put on my coat and went. I rocked Noah while she showered and washed her hair. I made toast and set it by her bed when she fell asleep. In the pink light of dawn, I walked home slowly and felt useful, like a railing on a staircase. Aaron's work began to change. At first, it was a seminar out of town, then a meeting in another city, then another. He would kiss Lily's forehead and hug Noah, then look at me and say, "It's only a short season, Mom. It will calm down." I nodded and believed him because that is what love does. Before he left, he always asked me the same thing. "Mom, when I'm gone, can you check on them?" I would smile. "Of course, my son." He would grip my shoulders and say, "Thank you," as if the words could carry him through the airport and back again. We fell into small routines. I often made porridge in the morning when I visited, stirred slow with a wooden spoon. I kept a soft blanket draped over the end of their couch because I liked the way it looked, ready and kind. On fair days, I took Noah in the stroller for a slow walk around the block so Lily could nap. I hummed, and the wheels made a quiet sound over the path. Mrs. Green, my neighbor, and I traded soup recipes over the phone. She taught me a new way to make lentils rich without meat, just onions and patience. I brought her a jar and she gave me back a jar of her own. "You're a good grandma," she told me through the screen door. I laughed and said, "I'm trying." Lily was tired, which is another word for brave when a baby is new. She was polite and careful. She asked me questions about Aaron's baby days, and we smiled together at old stories. "He liked to chew on the corners of books," I told her. She shook her head and laughed for a moment, the tiredness lifting. She was a good mother. She watched Noah closely and knew his different cries. She spoke to him in a low, even voice that made the room feel firm and safe. I saw that, and my heart relaxed again. I thought, in those early months, that we would grow close with time, like a garden that needs water but also patience. Sometimes, when the baby napped, I would wash bottles and set them to dry, then sit with my tea. The house would be quiet. I would look at the little shoes by their door, the stroller folded up by the wall, and feel that gentle, lived-in peace. I did not want to crowd it. I wanted to be the breeze through the window, not a storm. Once, Lily showed me a list on her phone where she kept track of feedings and changes and sleep. "It helps me feel like I know what's happening," she said. I nodded because I understood that feeling. After my husband died, I kept a little list too. Sweep, water plants, make tea, pray. It did not fix the ache, but it made a small path through it. When Aaron returned from trips, he tried to make up for the days he had missed. I watched him kiss both their heads and carry the baby through the rooms. "Tell me everything," he would say to Lily. She would tell him the funny parts and the hard parts, and I would slip my coat on and say, "I'll leave you too. Call me if you need anything." On Sundays, I invited them to my house for simple lunch, just soup, bread, and a salad. We ate slowly. We did not always finish our food because the baby needed to be held or changed. It did not matter. The sound of the spoon on the bowl, the soft talk, the small mess, that was family. With time, I started to notice how careful I felt in their home, and I told myself that was good. It meant I was learning their rhythm. I would stand in the hallway sometimes, listening for Lily's footsteps to know if it was a good moment to ask a question. I felt like a person who wants to help hang a picture, but is waiting for the nail. I also noticed how Lily sometimes watched the clock and how she would straighten the stack of mail when she passed the table. These were small things. They told me she kept a tight hold when she was tired, the way we all do. I tried to match her steps, not push my own. When I walked home in the afternoons, the wind sometimes met me at the corner. I would lift my chin and breathe. I would think of my husband and tell him, "It is a good life. The boy is a good father. She is a good mother." And I would add, "I am learning how to stand nearby without leaning too much." In those days, my hands were often a little damp from washing bottles, and my pockets smelled of ginger from the tea I carried with me. My heart felt busy and full. I slept well at night, even if the bed was large and empty. I believed that we were all, in our own ways, finding our places. I believed that closeness would grow, as long as we kept walking toward each other with gentle steps. The small tensions did not arrive like thunder. They came like tiny stones in my shoe. At first, I hardly felt them. Then, step by step, they changed the way I walked. I kept telling myself, "It is nothing," but my steps still grew careful. One afternoon, I offered to do a grocery run. I wrote a short list based on what I knew they liked. Bread, milk, eggs, porridge oats, apples, a few herbs, some tea. I added a jar of the marinara sauce I always kept at home, with the label I trusted. When I came back, Lily smiled and thanked me. She unpacked with quick fingers. She set some things aside on the far end of the counter. The sauce, the tea, a jar of pickles. "We use a different brand," she said softly. "Of course," I said, just as softly. I tried to sound easy. I folded the bag and placed it neatly in the basket for reuse. Later, I saw the set-aside things moved into a corner of the pantry, like guests who had arrived with the wrong coat. It was a small thing, a kind thing even. She had not scolded me. She had not rolled her eyes, but I felt the pinch. I felt like I had walked into a room with a song on my lips and realized it was the wrong song. The next day, I made a simple lentil soup that I loved. It was the recipe Mrs. Green had given me, full of onions, cumin, and a little clove. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and warm. It smelled like the soup pots of my childhood. Lily came in and lifted her nose. "It's a little strong, Mom," she said gently. Her voice was careful. "The baby has been fussy with smells." I felt my face warm. "Of course," I said. I opened a window. The wind came in and moved the curtains as if it was helping me clear the air. I turned the heat down and stood very still for a moment, letting the steam roll away. "It looks good," she added, kind again. "Maybe I'll have some later." "Yes," I said, and I smiled. I put the lid on and wiped the rim of the pot with the corner of my apron. I did not want to make it a big thing. It was a small note, a small correction. It was also a mark on my heart, light but present. Later, when the baby slept, I went to the bathroom and closed the door. I turned on the tap to make a little noise. I pressed a towel to my eyes for a moment and breathed. I told myself, "You are okay." I washed my hands and looked at my face in the mirror, and then I went back to the living room. Another day, I was folding laundry at their dining table. Tiny clothes, so soft and sweet, and some of their things too. A basket sat near the hallway. I thought it would be helpful to append it and fold those things as well. I moved the basket from just inside their bedroom door and carried it out into the light. Lily came around the corner and stopped. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Please don't go in our room," she said. Her voice was not sharp. It was small, tired. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. I felt my hands go still. "You're right, I should have asked." She nodded and moved the basket back toward the bedroom. "Thank you," she said, not unkind. Then she turned away, and I stood there with a tiny sock in my hands and a feeling like a child who had stepped on a line she could not see. I tried to shake it off. I told myself, "This is her home. She is setting her lines. You can respect that." I folded the tiny clothes with extra care, as if to make up for my mistake. I smoothed each little shirt and stacked them by color just because it made me feel steady. Things like that started to add up. Not big things. No one shouted. No one slammed a door. It was as if we were both learning a dance with very small movements, and I kept putting my foot a little too far. One evening, after I had washed the dishes, I reached for a mug to dry. It slipped. It was her favorite one, the light green one with a small white flower painted near the handle. It fell to the floor and broke into 3 pieces. The sound was bright and final. Lily came into the kitchen. She looked at the pieces. "It's okay," she said. Her face was neutral. Her shoulders had a drop in them I had seen before, a small fall that told the truth. "I'm so sorry," I said. I crouched to pick up the pieces and held them like little bones. "It was my mistake." "It's okay," she said again. She took the dustpan and held it steady for me. We both bent there, close but not touching. I carried the pieces to the trash and placed them in the bin with a careful hand, as if quiet could fix what was broken. That night, Aaron packed a small bag. "I have to go again," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed to tie his shoes. "It's a quick trip." He leaned over and kissed Lily's forehead. He kissed Noah's head. He looked at me and tried to smile. "Take care of each other." "We will," I said. I wanted to say more. I wanted to say, "Tell me exactly where to stand." But of course there was no answer for that. He held my shoulders and looked into my eyes like he was trying to transfer strength from his body to mine. Then he picked up his bag and waved at the doorway. The next day he sent me a photo of clouds beyond a wing. He'd flown somewhere again. I made porridge for breakfast and dressed Noah in a soft blue onesie. He gummed the spoon and smiled at me with his whole face. "You like it," I told him. I wiped his chin with a cloth and felt the joy of the moment in my hands. I took a picture of him then, cheeks full, eyes bright. I posted it in the family group chat where cousins and aunties all share bits of their days. I wrote, "Grandma's porridge," with a small heart. It felt innocent and sweet. The comments came quickly. "So cute! Look at those cheeks!" Then one from a cousin, "Old-fashioned food lol." It was a joke, I suppose, but it landed in me like a pebble. I looked for Lily's name. She did not say anything, though 2 dots blinked and then disappeared. I sat with the phone in my hand. I imagined her seeing my post and feeling watched. I imagined her thinking I was showing her kitchen to others, her child's face with my spoon, my words. I felt warm shame move through me like tea that was too hot. I deleted the photo and put the phone down. Later, I said to her, "I shared a picture in the family chat and then I deleted it. I should have asked first." She nodded. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that." "I'm sorry," I added. "It's okay," she replied. The words were soft, but they hung in the room. After that, I kept my phone in my pocket more often. I took fewer pictures. I tried to hold the moments in my mind instead. Not long after, they installed a new door camera. "It helps with packages," Aaron said before he left this time. "We can see when things arrive and when people come. It's safer." I agreed. It was a good idea. In this world, we all need a little more safety. He showed me how it worked on his phone. The camera view popped up. The door looked like a small theater stage. The first time I came by after that, I felt the little hum of the camera notice me. It made a soft click. My phone vibrated later with a message. "Mom came by," Aaron wrote, friendly and simple. "Package delivered too." I felt suddenly seen, though not in a warm way. Not seen like a hug, seen like a dot on a map. I began to text before I walked over. "Is it a good time?" I would write. If I did not get an answer, I would stand outside for a while, waiting for the reply before I tried the handle. Sometimes I waited long enough to give up and go home. The wind felt like company then, and I held the straps of my bag and told myself stories to keep the ache small. The camera was not unkind. It was only a tool. It became, for me, a small gate I could not open without asking. I thought that was right. It was their door. I should not be an unannounced breeze. I should be a knock, a request. One afternoon, after a quiet lunch, Lily told me they planned to try daycare 3 days a week. She said it with calm care, like a nurse delivers instructions. "It will be good for him to be with other children," she said, "and it will help me get back to work without feeling like I'm always behind." I smiled and nodded. "That sounds good," I said. "He will learn songs and share little toys. He will come home ready to sleep." I kept my voice steady and warm. It was true, all of it. It was also true that something in me fell a small distance, the way a leaf drops without fuss. After I walked home, I called Auntie Rose. I sat by the window with my tea and watched a sparrow pick at the edge of the wall. "They are doing the right thing," I told her. "Daycare will be good." "Yes," she said, "it is good." "I feel sad," I admitted. I liked being needed in that way. "It is okay to be sad," she said. "Sadness is not wrong. It can sit with you, make it tea. Then let it sit in the other chair, not in your lap." I laughed a little, then cried softly. "I will try," I said. "If you ever want to laugh for no reason, call me," she added. "We can be old ladies who laugh at nothing." "I would like that," I said, and I wiped my face and felt the teacup warm my hand. One day, I gathered a few groceries to bring over. Bread, bananas, a small bag of rice, and a carton of eggs. I put on my scarf and checked for my key. I must have thought I had it, but it was sitting in the bowl at home. I only realized when I stood at their door with the bag in my arms. I texted, "Here with groceries." No dots appeared. I pressed the bell. The camera blinked at me. I waited and shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The wind picked up and blew hair across my face. I smoothed it behind my ear. I pressed the bell again. Still nothing. I did not want to leave the bag on the step because of the eggs. I sat down gently on the porch. The step was cool under me. I hummed a little tune my mother used to sing while she shelled peas. A neighbor I did not know well walked by and paused. "Are you lost?" she asked. "No," I said with a small smile. "Just waiting." She smiled back, a little uncertain, and walked on. After a while, I sent another text. "I can come back later." Then I stood, adjusted my scarf, and carried the groceries home. It was not heavy, but it felt like it was. There were other small things. I put the mail in a tidy stack one day, and later realized Lily had her own system, with bills to the left and letters to the right. I moved them back as best I could, feeling like someone who touched an instrument and played the wrong chord. Once I put a clean towel in the linen closet and noticed all her towels were rolled, not folded. I stood there with a rectangle in my hands and laughed quietly at myself. I rolled it as best I could and placed it with the others. Another time, I bought a small plant for their kitchen window. Later, I found it on the back steps. "Needs more sun," she had said. She was right. I took it home and set it on my sill. I began to feel like the wind had to be just right for me to land. If I was too soon, I might blow out a candle. If I was too late, I would miss the moment. I tried to be helpful without coming forward. It is a hard way to stand. On a Saturday morning, I watched Noah while Lily took a shower and a short nap. He crawled to the low shelf where she kept some bowls. He pulled out a wooden spoon and banged it. I laughed and let him. When she came out, she looked at the bowl, then at me. "We try not to let him take things from the kitchen," she said. "He puts things in his mouth." "Of course," I said, and I took the spoon and wiped it. I felt silly and a little scolded, though she had not scolded me. I added it to the list in my head. No wooden spoons. I started to hold my breath a little in their house. Not for long, just those small moments when I was not sure if I should move or ask or stay still. It reminded me of being in a church as a child, afraid to fidget. Sometimes, when I did not know what to do, I went and make tea. The kettle was a safe place. I could feel it. I could listen to the water heat, the soft sound like a kind heartbeat. I could offer tea, and usually the answer was yes. There were good days, too. Noah laughed and clapped his hands. Lily and I watched a program together in the evening when he was asleep. We shared quiet talk about nothing big. Those moments made me think, we are learning each other. Then there would be another small bump. After one of Aaron's trips, he came back with a new habit. He checked the camera every time someone came to the door. The phone would buzz. He would look at it. "Who's that?" he would call, even if it was me and I was already saying hello. It made me feel like a person coming to a window at a shop, not a mother coming to a home. He did not mean anything by it. He was tired. He was trying to keep things straight from far away. He would put his arm around me and say, "How are you, Mom?" And I would answer, "I am well." He would say, "We could not do this without you," and I would nod, and my chest would ache because that did not feel true anymore. A small misunderstanding came on a Friday. Lily had asked for help with a doctor appointment for Noah. She said, "Can you come by at 10:30? I misread it and came at 10. When I saw her in her robe with wet hair, I knew I was too early. "I'm sorry," I said, standing in the doorway with my bag like it was a ticket I had purchased for the wrong show. "It's fine," she replied, but she looked at the clock and I felt the drop again. We waited in the living room together. I tried to make gentle talk about the weather. It felt like trying keys in a lock and not finding the one that fit. Another time I made a stew and brought it over. I had used a small amount of butter. Later, I heard through Aaron that Lily's stomach had been upset. She mentioned maybe lactose. I wished I had asked before I cooked. I started to keep a little notebook in my handbag with notes. Oat milk, not dairy, spices mild, no surprises. It was a kind notebook. It was also a sign that I was not just loving. I was managing myself to be acceptable. There is a difference. I could feel it in my shoulders, the way they started sitting higher, closer to my ears. One evening, when Aaron was packing again, he sat on the couch with his head back. "It's just a short trip," he said. "2 nights." He looked at Lily. "We'll be okay," he added. He looked at me. "Mom, if you can drop by." "I will," I said. I heard the words and felt the shape of them in my mouth. They were easy to say. They were heavy to carry. He'd flown somewhere again, and I did not know how to measure myself in his absence. When he left, he texted me from the airport. "Take care of each other," he wrote. I held the phone and stared at the words. I thought of the space between help and intrusion. I thought of the line I kept finding and stepping on. I told myself, be light, be like wind, not like a hand. In the middle of all this, there were little kindnesses. Lily brought me flowers one day, small daisies like the ones she carried the day we met. "For you," she said. "Thank you for the soup last week." I put them in a glass on my table and felt seen. Then, 2 days later, I put a dish in their dishwasher the wrong way, and we were off beat again. I called Mrs. Green sometimes and told her pieces. Not complaints, just the shape of the days. She said, "You are both good people who are tired." I nodded and thought that maybe this is how many stories go wrong, not with villains, but with tired hearts and thin patience. On a rainy afternoon, I remembered I had left my knitting at their house. I walked over and sent a text when I reached the gate. "Can I grab my knitting?" I waited. The rain was light and the wind pushed the drops into a soft mist. A few minutes passed. Then a message, "Now's not a good time." I wrote back, "Okay, I'll come later," and walked home with my empty hands. It was good to be told the truth. It still hurt. At home, I stood in my kitchen and looked at my husband's photograph. "How do I stand back and also belong?" I asked him. His smile in the photo was the same as always. I put water in the kettle and watched the steam like a small cloud that knew how to let go. Sometimes Noah would reach for me with both hands, and everything else would melt. I would hold him close and feel the old, deep love that does not need rules. But of course, we live in houses with rooms, and rooms have doors, and doors have locks, and love has to fit inside the shape of real life. I began to leave earlier than I wanted to. I would look at the clock and say, "I should go," even if no one had asked. Once, Lily said, "You can stay," and I did for a little longer. Another time, she said nothing, and I took that as a yes to my leaving. I noticed my feet making smaller steps in their hallway. I noticed my bag always packed with a few things for making tea and a small snack, so I would not open their fridge without asking. I noticed that my laughter became softer, as if even joy should not take up too much space. One evening, I offered to bathe Noah. I had bathed many Bobbies in my life. The sink felt like a small boat, but Lily watched me with a face that said she was ready to step in if I did it wrong. "We don't use soap every day," she said gently. "Okay," I said. I used only warm water in my hand. Noah smiled and kicked his toes. He splashed me and squealed. I felt my own smile lift. After I wrapped him in a towel and kissed his wet head, I handed him back and wiped the sink. Lily said, "Thank you," and I could tell she meant it. I went home and cried anyway, for reasons I could not name and did not need to. Quiet misunderstandings can build a wall even when no one is trying to build one. A missed text, a closed door, a dish put in the wrong place, a spoon used when we are trying not to use that spoon. The wall is not high. You can see over it, but you still have to walk around it, and that takes time. I started to think that maybe my best gift was not my hands, but my absence at the right moments. This felt strange. I had spent so many years being a person who showed up, who swept the floor, who made the tea. Now I wondered if the kind thing was to leave the floor a little dirty and the tea unmade and go home. Still, I did not want to vanish. I sent little texts in the morning. "Thinking of you." Sometimes Lily wrote back with a photo of Noah's new face, the way he wrinkled his nose. On those days, the wall felt low. On other days, there was no reply, and I told myself she was busy, and that was true. Once I walked to the park on my own and sat on a bench. I watched a father lift his daughter to see a squirrel on a tree trunk. The wind moved through the leaves and made them talk to one another. I thought, everyone is trying. It gave me a little peace. By the time Aaron's next trip came, the house felt different to me. Not unkind, just careful. He stood in the doorway with his bag and said, "Take care of each other," again. I nodded, and the words echoed in my chest. Take care, take care. I carried them home with me like a small, fragile thing. I wished I could sit with Lily and say, "Tell me exactly what you need." And she would say, "This, this, and this," and I would say, "Yes," and we would draw a little map. Instead, we moved around each other like polite people in a tight kitchen. "Excuse me." "No, you go." We smiled. We sighed when we were apart, alone in our different rooms. On a weekday morning, I arrived a little early again. I stood outside and waited for the text that said I could come in. The wind picked up and touched my face. It felt kind. I thought of my husband's words, "Let the wind carry the heat from your chest." I breathed out. I heard my phone buzz. "Come," the message said. I stepped inside and took off my shoes. I lined them neatly by the door. The house smelled like fresh laundry. Noah was on the floor with a soft block in his hand. He looked up and saw me and laughed. In that sound, I found my courage for another day. And yet, at the edges of these days, my love began to feel thin. Not less, just stretched. I began to hold my breath in small moments, afraid to press, afraid to be wrong. I began to exist in the spaces between their needs, like water that changes shape to fit a cup. I did not resent them. I did not resent anyone. I felt only tired and careful and a little sad. I was learning something I did not have a name for yet. I would learn it fully later, outside their party with the wind as my companion. But here, in the small rooms and soft days, the lesson had already begun. How to love by stepping back without disappearing. How to stand near without taking over. how to keep my heart open while I folded my hands. The week of the party began with small signs I did not understand at first. On a quiet afternoon, I took my usual walk past their street. I like to pass their house even when I am not going in. It makes me feel close without crossing the line. The wind was light, and a delivery van stopped near their gate. A young man stepped out with a bunch of balloons tied together. They were pale blue and silver, moving in a small dance above his head. I smiled without meaning to. Balloons make even the most serious people look a little boyish as they try to keep them from flying away. He rang the bell and handed them over to someone inside. The door closed again, and the balloons floated near the window. I told myself it could be anything. Maybe Lily's friend had a birthday and left the balloons with her for later. Maybe it was a decoration someone had borrowed and was returning. Balloons like to travel. It did not have to be a party. I made this quiet promise to my heart and kept walking. At the corner, I checked my phone. There was no message from Aaron or Lily. My morning text to Lily, "Thinking of you," had a small heart next to it, nothing more. That was normal. That was fine. I slipped the phone back into my bag and looked at the sky. It was the color of clean sheets. The next day, I passed by again on my way to the market. I saw one of Aaron's cousins, a sweet girl with quick hands, carrying a white cake box into their house. She moved with care, holding the box level like it was a small, sleeping animal. She smiled to herself as she went in. The door closed, and I saw her shadow move across the window. I paused. I told myself it must be small. Maybe Lily was helping her with something. Maybe it was a cake for someone at her work. Maybe they were hosting a friend and did not want to trouble me. I stood there for a breath and then started walking again, counting my steps to calm my heart. At the market, I bought apples and onions. I held an apple up to my nose and breathed in its clean scent. On the way home, my feet felt heavy, like they were carrying a thought I could not set down. I sat on the bench in the little park and watched a sparrow take a bath in a shallow puddle. It hopped and shook itself and looked brighter afterward. When I reached my kitchen, I put the kettle on and took the flour down from the shelf. My hands acted before my mind did. I reached for sugar, for a lemon, for a small bottle of vanilla. I put the eggs on the counter and called out to the empty room, "Just a simple cake." My voice sounded steady, the way it does when I am trying to be brave. I checked my phone again. No message. I scrolled through old photos of Noah, his first smile with gums only, his tiny hand holding my finger like a tree trunk, a picture of him asleep on Aaron's chest while a game showed on the muted TV. I scrolled and then I stopped. My heart started to race in that quiet way when you know you have to choose something. I chose to bake. I cracked the eggs into a bowl and beat them with sugar until the color paled. I added flour and a small pour of milk. I used oat milk, the one Lily keeps, because I wanted to be careful even if this was only for my house. I scraped the batter into a small round pan and spread it smooth. I rubbed a lemon against the grater and breathed in the sharp, clean scent that makes every room feel like it has been wiped down with sunlight. As the cake baked, I washed the bowl and wiped the counter. I stood in front of the oven window and watched the batter lift as the heat did its quiet work. It reminded me of how a heart can lift too, even when it is heavy. I remembered baking cakes when Aaron was small. He would sit on a chair and watch with big eyes and ask, "Is it ready? Is it ready?" I would say, "Not yet. We have to wait for the middle to be done." The timer rang. I pulled the cake out. It was simple, nothing fancy. I brushed the top with a little lemon syrup I made with sugar and juice. It shone like a new penny. I let it cool and then wrapped it in a clean towel. I put it on the counter and folded the towel corners like a hug. As evening came, the light outside turned soft. I looked out my window and saw the sky blush a little. I could not sit. I walked from the kitchen to the living room and back. I looked at my phone. No message. I told myself many things. Maybe they forgot. Maybe it was a short visit with neighbors, not a party. Maybe they needed a night with their friends, no parents, no expectations. It helped a little, and then it did not. I tied a scarf around my neck and put on my coat. I lifted the cake, still wrapped in the towel, and held it close like a small, quiet child. I turned off the lamp and locked my door. The air outside was cooler than the day had been. The wind moved the tree branches gently, like someone smoothing a wrinkle out of a bedspread. When I reached their street, I knew the house glowed. The string lights in the yard were on, small stars in a line. The front windows shone warm. I could hear music, the kind that makes your shoulders sway without you noticing. The sound of glasses touched lightly together. Laughter not loud but easy. Happy voices braided together like threads in a soft cloth. I stopped at the gate and took one breath, then another. I placed the cake on my hip for a moment to free a hand and smooth the edge of my scarf. My fingers trembled. I told myself, "Wait, listen to your heart, do not rush." I stood so I could see the front door but not be seen. The camera above the door blinked a little red eye in the corner. I felt it notice me. I did not press the bell. I shifted the cake back into my arms. It was not heavy, but I felt the weight of it anyway. I looked at their front window. The curtain was open a small amount, just enough to let the light out like warm breath. A child's laugh floated through the gap. It sounded like Noah. My chest ached in that sweet way love can ache. The wind lifted the edge of my scarf and touched my cheek. It felt like a hand I knew, a hand that had held me for many years. I remembered my husband's voice, the one that lives in my bones. "Let the wind carry away the heat from your chest," he would say when life pressed too hard. I whispered, "I am trying," to the night. I took one step closer to the window, then stopped myself. I did not want to look in. I did not want to turn a happy room into a display. I stayed by the gate and let the sounds come to me like the scent of soup through a doorway. The music was gentle. Someone clapped. A chair moved against the floor with a small scrape. Then I heard it. A voice I did not know said through the slightly open window, "Did you invite his mom?" The voice was light, curious. It did not carry harm. There was a pause. I could imagine Lily's face, the one she wears when she thinks. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and tired and honest. "No," she said. "I needed one night to breathe. I know she means well, but I feel like I cannot breathe in my own kitchen. I feel like I'm always watched." The words were soft. They were not cruel. They were still a blade, not a big one, a small one that still cuts. I closed my eyes. I stood very still. I listened to the hum of the street lamp and the soft lift of the wind. I told myself, "Do not turn this into a story where someone is a villain. Keep listening. Keep your heart open." Someone else asked, "Where, Aaron?" The answer came from another voice, easy, like it was no big thing. "He's on a work trip." He'd flown somewhere again. I saw in my mind the wing of a plane cutting through clouds, the world below hidden in a soft blanket of white. He could not see the lights, the balloons, the cake box on their table. He could not see me at the gate with my towel-wrapped cake and my careful breath. I held the cake closer and thought about knocking. I pictured Lily's face when she opened the door, her small smile and her shoulders lifting a fraction. I pictured my own voice saying, "Just a minute, I will leave this and go." I could hear Noah in the background, and my heart reached for him the way a flower turns to sun. I also thought about leaving. I pictured myself turning around and walking home. I saw the cake on my kitchen table and me cutting a slice for myself that I would not eat. I saw myself sleeping and waking with a heavy spot in my chest. My legs felt old for a moment, as if they had walked a very long way to arrive at this small gate. I waited there with both choices in my hands. The wind moved again. It lifted the scarf and pressed it against my neck like a hand smoothing a collar. I remembered the first time I met Lily. She had brought daisies and would not come empty-handed. I remembered my own vow to be kind and careful and to give them space to grow the home they wanted. Space and warmth can sit together, I had told myself. I decided to honor what I heard. I would not knock. I would not turn my not invitation into a surprise. I looked around and saw the little bench in their small front garden. It sat under the window, next to a plant they kept in a round pot. I stepped quietly to it and set the cake down there, still wrapped in the towel. I reached into my pocket for the small cards I sometimes carry. They are blank, for grocery lists or quick notes. My hand shook a little as I pulled one out and found a pen. I thought about what to write. I did not want to make Lily feel worse. I did not want to make a small thing big. I wrote, "For my little star, I love you, Grandma." Then I lifted the edge of the towel and tucked the note beneath, near the plate. It felt like placing a tiny boat in a river. I smoothed the towel back in place and put my palm on it for a moment, as if to bless it with all the love that rose up in me like warm air. I stayed there for a few breaths longer. The sounds inside the house continued. Someone told a small story and people laughed in that kind, soft way that comes after the punchline lands well. I felt my mouth smile a little, even here. I like when people laugh. I like when rooms are easy. I touched the gate with my free hand and looked up at the sky. A plane moved across a dark strip of blue, small and steady, its light blinking. I thought of my son in a seat by a window, maybe asleep with an empty cup on his tray. I felt both close and far from him at the same time. I did not cry loud. I did not want the sound to reach their happy room. I let a few tears come and let the wind take them from my cheeks the way it takes small leaves in autumn. I breathed big and slow and counted the breaths like beads. I said in my heart, "Bless this house, bless these people, bless this night, bless my steps as I walk away." I lifted my empty hand and held the handle of my cake carrier. I had taken the plate out and left the cake on it, so the carrier felt light and silly in my fingers. I turned from the gate and started down the path. My shoes made a soft sound on the stones. The string lights glowed behind me, and I could feel their warmth on my back for a moment, like a sun. As I reached the sidewalk, I heard the music shift to a slow song. It reminded me of a tune my husband used to hum. I thought of the way he would sway in the kitchen, tapping the counter with his fingers, and how I would pretend not to notice and then join him. That memory did not hurt. It felt like a soft hand on my shoulder, steadying me. I walked slowly. I did not rush. There was no reason to hurry away from the place where my heart stood. The air was cool and kind. The wind was my friend again, keeping pace beside me, saying nothing, just being there. A neighbor stepped out from their door across the street. He nodded to me, and I nodded back. My scarf fluttered and then settled again. I carried the empty handle and thought about how strange it felt to hold a thing made for weight when it was empty. It made my hand feel like it had forgotten its job. As I passed the small park, I heard a group of teenagers laugh and call to each other. The sound bounced and then faded. A dog barked once and then settled with a chuff, like it had only a small opinion to express. A car went by with its windows down and a soft beat inside. The world went on, both indifferent and somehow tender. I did not look back until I reached the end of the street. When I did, the house was smaller. The lights looked like dots. The laughter was a hint. It felt like watching a boat move away from the shore. You know it is full of people and blankets and food, but from far away you only see the shape and the small flag at the top. I turned the corner and the sound fell off like a tide going out. It did not disappear all at once. It pulled back in small ways, leaving a little wet shimmer in my ears. Then it was quiet, just my steps and the wind and the soft rhythm of my breathing. At my door, I fumbled a little with the key. My fingers were not as steady as I liked. I stood there for a second with my head against the door, feeling the wood, cool and solid. "You are home," I told myself. "You are safe." I turned the key and went in. I did not turn on the overhead light. I flicked on the small lamp by the chair and let its warm circle be enough. I set the empty cake carrier on the counter. It made a little clack that sounded too loud in the quiet room. I placed my scarf on the hook and smoothed it with my hand, the way I do when I am trying to calm a child or myself. I went to the window and looked out. The night was blue-black. A few lights on the hill blinked like slow eyes. I could not see their house from here. I did not try. I put my palms on the windowsill and bent my head. My chest felt both full and hollow. It is a strange thing to feel both, like the moment before you cry and the moment after at the same time. I took another breath, deep and steady. I could taste lemon in the air from where I had zested earlier. It made me think of clean things and fresh starts and the sharp truth that wakes you up. I went to the hallway and paused by my husband's photograph. "We did our best," I whispered to him. "I am learning something tonight." I touched the frame with one finger. The glass was cool. I stood there a while, not long, just long enough to let my breathing settle again. Back in the kitchen, I washed the small bowl I had used for the syrup. I wiped the counter even though it was already clean. I put the kettle on and then turned it off again before it boiled. I did not want tea. I only wanted the sound of water preparing to be useful. I sat in my chair by the window and folded my hands. I did not turn on the radio. I did not pick up my phone. I let the quiet sit with me like a guest I knew well. I looked at the empty cake carrier and smiled a little at the way it stood upright, ready, as if it expected me to lift its handle again and go back out. After a while, I stood and went to my bedroom. I changed into my nightgown and pulled the covers back. I did not think about what might be said when the cake was found. I tried not to build a scene in my head. I told myself, "You left love at the door. That is enough." Before I turned off the lamp, I went to the living room once more. I opened the window an inch and let the night air in. It brushed my face and smelled faintly of leaves and something sweet from a neighbor's kitchen. I stood there with my eyes closed and felt the breeze move over my skin. "Carry it," I whispered, not sure if I meant the wind to carry my pain or my love, or both. "Carry it where it should go." I thought about how we cannot push our way into rooms where we are not invited. We can only put our hearts down gently at the threshold and trust that the right people will open the door when they are ready. I turned off the light and went to bed. The house held me the way it knows how. The sheets were cool against my legs. In the dark, the wind kept talking softly at the window, like an old story I had heard before but was only now learning to understand. I did not dream of balloons or string lights. I did not dream of cake or windows or questions asked in low voices. I slept in pieces, the way people do when something in them is shifting. Each time I woke, I lay still and listened. The night was kind. The world outside breathed with me. In the morning, there would be new choices, new ways to stand, new words to try. But that night, the turning had already happened. It happened at the gate with a towel-wrapped cake and a soft voice through a window. It happened when I chose not to knock and when I tucked a note that said, "For my little star, I love you, Grandma." It happened when I walked away, heart open, hands empty, and let the wind comfort me as the party sounds faded like a tide. The morning after the party was very quiet. The light came in soft, like it did not want to wake anything too fast. I put the kettle on and listened to the water begin its small song. On the counter lay a folded towel from last night's washing. I picked it up and held it for a long time, the way you hold something when you need to hold yourself. When the kettle clicked, I poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the color bloom. I carried the cup to the table with both hands. The steam touched my face like a kind breath. I took a small sip and let it rest in my mouth. The room was still, and the clock made a quiet rhythm that felt like a lullaby. After a few moments, I stood and walked to the hallway. My husband's photograph waited there, the way it always does. I stood before it and spoke the way you speak to someone who cannot answer with words. "We did our best," I told him. My voice was low, soft enough to match the morning. Maybe I held too tightly. The words felt true and also tender. They did not accuse. They did not defend. They simply sat between us like a folded blanket. I touched the edge of the frame with one finger. Then I went back to the kitchen and folded the towel at last, corner to corner, pressing the seam flat with my hand. I chose something that day. I decided to step back, not from love, from habit. I said to myself, "Give them room, give yourself room." I said it again like a small prayer. "Give them room, give yourself room." The words softened the air around me. They gave me a small path to follow. On the small table near my chair was a leaflet from Mrs. Green. She had handed it to me last week through her screen door. "Community Garden Mornings," it read, simple and plain. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 11. Come," she had said. "It is good to put your hands in the earth." I picked up the leaflet and looked at it for a long time. At 9, I tied my scarf and slid my feet into my walking shoes. The air outside felt clean. The wind was gentle, the kind that moves the leaves just enough to make them whisper. The garden was behind the library, marked by a low fence and a wooden gate. When I stepped through, a few people turned and smiled like they had been waiting just for me, even though they had not. A woman with gray hair tied up in a scarf waved. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Nora." Her voice had the sound of someone who trusts small steps. A young man in a blue jacket handed me a pair of spare gloves. "We're planting beans today," he said. "Good work for a new friend." I knelt beside a raised bed and felt the soil through the glove, cool and honest. Nora showed me how to make a small furrow with my fingers. "2 seeds here," she said, "and 2 there, not too close. They need room for roots. I smiled at that. It seemed like the day was speaking back to me in many ways. We planted in quiet rhythm. The sun warmed my neck and back. The beans were small, pale seeds, simple and brave. I dropped them into the earth and covered them gently, like tucking a child into bed. The wind moved over the plots and the leaves on a nearby tree clapped softly, as if to say, "Yes, this is the way." Now and then someone spoke. A woman told me about the best time to water. A man explained how to tie a trellis with string. I listened and nodded. I liked that no one needed my story. They only needed my hands and my presence. The work made sense. The soil took what we gave it and asked for steady care, nothing more. After we finished our row, Nora poured water into a plastic cup and handed it to me. "Drink," she said. I did. The water tasted like a simple gift. "The beans will come up in their time," she added. "You'll see, it's good to watch something rise slowly. It teaches patience without any speech." I walked home with dirt under my nails and a light ache in my back. It felt like a good ache, one that says, "You used your body for something gentle." At the bus stop, I checked the schedule posted on the pole. I had not taken the bus in a long time. The number I needed would arrive in 2 minutes. When the bus pulled up, the door opened with a soft breath. I climbed the steps and tapped my card. The driver nodded. I found a seat by the window and put my bag on my lap. The town moved past in slow pictures. A man with a red cap walking a dog, a pair of schoolchildren sharing a sandwich, a woman with a baby tied to her chest. The bus made its route like a calm animal. At home, I called my sister. We always begin with small things. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "A little," she said. "Did you?" "Some." We talked about her plants and my kettle. These easy ropes let us cross to the deeper part without drowning. Then I told her about the party. I told her I had stood outside and heard the words that were not meant for me. I told her I left a cake and a note and walked home with my empty hands. My voice did not shake. It moved evenly, the way a river moves after the rain is gone. She listened and did not interrupt. When I finished, she breathed out with me. "You did a good thing," she said. "You chose kindness even when it pinched." I nodded, though she could not see me. "It still hurts," I said. "It will," she answered. "And then it will not, and sometimes it will again. It means you care, that's not a problem to fix." I thanked her for listening. She told me to eat something warm. I told her I would. We hung up gently, the way we always do, like placing a dish in the sink and not dropping it in. That afternoon, I went to the library. A small sign near the entrance said, "Community Singing, Wednesdays at 3. I had seen it many times. I had not gone. Today I stepped into the little room where chairs were arranged in a circle. A woman with a guitar smiled at me. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Anna." I sat down near a window. We sang old songs that did not ask for any show. We sang a lullaby I knew from childhood, and "You Are My Sunshine," all of us together. Some in tune, some not, all forgiven. My voice felt thin at first, like a bird that forgot how to fly. Then it warmed. I could feel sound vibrating in my chest like a quiet engine. It felt like waking a part of me that had been sleeping. That evening I made soup for myself. Carrots, onions, a little rice, a bay leaf. I cooked it slow and tasted it and added just a pinch more salt. I set the table for one with care. A napkin, a spoon, a glass of water. I turned the radio on low. There was a soft voice reading the news, calm and measured. I ate my soup and watched the steam twist up, and I felt both lonely and calm. The next morning, I sent Lily a short text. "Thinking of you?" I did not add a second line. I did not ask a question. I let the message be a seed, small and honest. A little heart came back some time later. It felt like a hand squeeze across a table. I put the phone down and breathed. Days passed with this new rhythm. I did not go to their house unless I was asked. I did not hover. I did not press my love into their doorway. I stayed in my home and filled it with my own quiet life. I swept each morning. I moved Noah's drawings off my fridge into a folder and wrote dates in the corners, like a small museum. I watered the plant on my sill and turned it now and then so it would grow even. On Tuesday, I went to the garden and watered the beds. On Thursday, I took the bus and sat on the same side, near the back, where the view was wide. I called my sister twice that week, and we laughed at something small. Her cat sleeping with one paw over its face, my radio host mispronouncing a street name. These were little joys that did not require permission. One afternoon, I found a plant on my step from Mrs. Green. "For your window," her note said. "It's hard to kill." I smiled and set it in a clay pot and placed it on the sill. It made the room feel like a small garden of its own. I stood there for a long time, just looking at the green and the light. Then one day, my phone buzzed with Aaron's name. "Home tonight," he wrote. "Can I come tomorrow morning?" I wrote back, "Yes, tea at 10. My fingers were calm. My heart lifted and settled again, like a bird rising a little and then resting. He arrived at 10, as he always tries to do. When he came into my kitchen, he stopped. His eyes went to the fridge and then to the folder on the shelf. "Where are Noah's drawings?" he asked. "In here," I said. I opened the folder and showed him the pages, the dates, the little notes I wrote in the corners. His face softened. "It looks like a museum," he said. He noticed the plant on the windowsill. "New friend?" he asked. "From Mrs. Green," I said. "She says it can survive me." He laughed, then grew quiet. He looked around the room, the cups lined up, the kettle warm, the radio off, the light holding steady. "It's quiet here," he said. "It feels different." I nodded and poured tea for both of us. We sat at the table and wrapped our hands around our cups. He looked at me with the question already in his eyes. "Mom," he said, "why didn't you come to the party?" His voice was careful, the way you hold a glass you don't want to drop. I told him gently what I had heard. I told him how I had stood by the gate and listened without trying to be a shadow at the window. I told him about the cake on the bench and the little note tucked under the towel. I said, "I understood. It hurt, but I understood. I love you both, and I will give your home back to you." His face went soft, and then it broke a little. He put his hand over his mouth and closed his eyes. "I should have protected you," he said. The words came so quietly it felt like they were afraid to be in the room. "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was warm and strong and still my boy's hand. "No," I said, and I meant it. "Protect your home. Learn it. I am learning mine." He nodded and tears came. One slid down his cheek, and he brushed it away like a man who has learned not to be ashamed of water. He squeezed my fingers and breathed out. "We'll do better," he said. "We'll try to say things before they pile up." "We all will," I said, "and when we forget, we will try again." We drank our tea and talked about small things too. He told me about the trip, the delay, the hotel coffee with the taste of cardboard, the view of a river he barely saw. I told him about the beans at the garden and the singing group, and how my voice felt like a thin wire that grew into a string strong enough to hold a tune. We laughed at the right places. The quiet between us felt like a clean floor. A few days later, my phone buzzed with Lily's name. "Can I visit?" she wrote. I looked at the words for a second and felt a soft heat in my chest, not painful, just warm. "Please do," I wrote back. "Tea at 3. She replied, "I'll bring cake." At 5 minutes to 3, I set the table the way I like it. 2 cups, a small plate of biscuits, a dish of lemon slices. I opened the window just a bit. The air that came in was fresh and gentle. When the bell rang, I opened the door and found Lily holding a small white box tied with string. "I brought a lemon cake," she said. "I remembered you like lemon." "I do," I said. "Thank you." We sat at the table and let the kettle do its work. She looked tired in a clean way, like someone who has been swimming and now sits on the edge catching her breath. I did not rush. I poured tea and pushed the sugar toward her without speaking. "I am sorry," she said at last, looking at her hands. "I am sorry for shutting you out. I was drowning. I didn't know how to ask for space without hurting you." Her voice shook a little but did not break. "I am sorry too," I said. "I am sorry for stepping where I should have asked. I wanted to help. I forgot that you needed to make your own home in your own way." She nodded and let out a breath she had been holding. "I love your help," she said. "I also need to feel like I can breathe in my kitchen, like I know what will be where. I need to feel like a mother, not like I am being checked." "I hear you," I said. "We can find a kinder way." We made simple agreements, spoken in plain words that fit in the room. She would ask for help and not assume that I could always say yes. I would ask before I did and not assume help was needed. I would not clean their bedroom or move laundry from their room without being asked. We would have a weekly tea at my place, even if for only 20 minutes, so we would not need a big reason to see each other. We would share a simple calendar for visits, so no one would have to guess. Space and warmth can sit together, I said quietly. Yes, she said. Please, I want both. We cut the lemon cake and ate small slices. It was soft and bright. I told her it reminded me of the cake I left on the bench that night, and her eyes lifted quickly, then softened. I found it, she said. There was a note, thank you for that. He had a piece in the morning and asked for more. He said, "Grandma cake." The words went right into the place inside me that had been sore, and they cooled it. I pressed my hand to my chest for a second and smiled. I am glad, I said. I hoped he would taste my love. We shared a small laugh over the broken mug. I stood and took a plain white mug from the cupboard, one with a strong handle and a little weight to it. I found this, I said. It is not the same as the green one, but it can be ours if you like. She turned it in her hands and nodded. I like it, she said. It's steady. Let's call it our mug. The word our felt good in the room. It made space without closing anything off. When she stood to leave, she hugged me. It was a new kind of hug for us. It did not try to prove anything. It just wrapped and held and said, "We are here." She thanked me for the tea. I thanked her for coming. She walked down the path with lighter steps. The next week, they invited me for a quiet lunch. The message came in the morning. If you're free at 1, it said, we would like you to come for soup. I smiled and wrote back, yes, thank you. I did not arrive early. I walked slowly and reached the gate at 1 exactly, then rang the bell. The door opened and the house smelled like tomato soup and basil. Music played low, just enough to make the air warm. Noah saw me and ran with his hands open and his mouth sticky. Grandma, he said, did you see my new kite? He pulled me by the fingers toward the backyard. Soup first, Lily called, laughter in her voice. We sat at the table, and I watched the way Noah tried to dip his bread without dropping it. He told me about a bird that stole his cracker in the park. He told me about a big truck he saw. We smiled and asked small questions and let the answers be enough. When we finished, we went outside. The sky was wide and blue with a few long clouds like paths for birds. The wind was gentle but steady. Noah held the red kite and looked at me with bright eyes. Again, he said, though we had not flown it yet. He meant again as in again be with me, again share this moment, again show me how. We walked to the middle of the grass. I took the spool and held the kite by its frame. We wait for the wind, I told him. It will come. When it touches our faces, we let go. He nodded in a serious way that only small children can. We stood and felt the air. The wind lifted a little and brushed my cheek. Now, I said, and we moved our hands. The kite rose and then fell. He looked at me with a question but no sadness. Again, he said. We waited again. The wind came back, a little stronger this time. I lifted the kite and gave a gentle tug to the string. It caught. The kite climbed. It shook once like a bird testing its wings. Then it steadied. I felt the pull on the line. I held it for a moment and then put the spool in Noah's hands. I kept my hand over his for a breath, then moved it away. He stood with the string and looked up with his mouth open. There it is, I said softly. You see, the wind is your friend. He laughed and looked from the kite to me and back. The tail of the kite fluttered. Lily stood on the steps, her arms folded in a way that looked like comfort, not defense. She stepped down and came to stand beside me. We watched the kite and the boy who held it. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Thank you for inviting me, I replied. We did not need more words than that. When the wind changed, the kite lost its lift and came down. Noah ran to it, hands forward, giggling at the chase. We wound the string together and put it in its bag. He took my hand again, sticky and warm. Again tomorrow, he said. If the wind wants to play, I said, and he nodded because that made sense to him. He was already learning that we do not control everything we love. We listen. We wait. We lift our hands at the right time and let the wind do its part. Back in the kitchen, I washed my hands and dried them on the towel hanging near the sink. We had a last cup of tea before I left. I showed Lily the shared calendar on my old phone and wrote the same dates in my paper one. She smiled at the way I still like pen and paper. "It helps me remember," I told her. "It makes the day feel real." When I put on my shoes, I lined them straight by the mat before I slipped my feet in. I hugged Lily and kissed Noah's hair and told them I would see them on Tuesday for tea. I stepped out into the afternoon, and the light felt kind. The wind met me at the corner and touched my cheek like a friendly hand. At home, I opened the folder of Noah's drawings. I wrote the day's date on a blank page and drew a little kite in the corner. It did not look much like a kite, but it looked like joy. I wrote, "We flew the kite. We let go. We held on." Then I closed the folder and set it neatly on the shelf. In the days that followed, I kept to the small agreements we made. I asked before I did, and sometimes I did not do, and that was love too. I went to the community garden and saw the first green slices of bean leaves push through the soil. I touched them with one finger and said, "Hello," and Nora laughed and said, "They like being greeted." I took the bus and recognized the same driver and nodded to him as if we were old friends. I sang at the library and felt my voice steady itself like a bird remembering its path. I made soup for myself and ate at the table with the radio on low. Some evenings I felt lonely. I poured the loneliness a cup of tea and set it in the other chair. Some evenings I felt calm. I let calm sit on my lap for a while like a cat. I learned I could hold both and still be myself. When I think of the morning after the party now, I remember the towel in my hands and the way the steam rose from my tea and disappeared into the air. I remember telling my husband, "We did our best." I remember saying to myself, "Give them room, give yourself room." Those words made a path I could walk. They led me to beans under soil, to a bus seat by a window, to voices in a circle, to soup at my own table, and finally back to their yard, where a red kite climbed because I lifted and then let go. It was not a grand fix. It was a series of quiet choices like stepping stones across a shallow stream. I did not stop loving. I loved in a different shape. I did not disappear. I pressed my feet into my own ground. And when the wind rose at the right time, I lifted my hands and let what needed to fly, fly. Then I watched with wonder, the way a child does, and I remembered to look up. Dear friends, if you are still with me, thank you for sitting close. I feel like we have been sharing a quiet room together. The wind has been a kind teacher to me. It reminds me to open my hands and my heart, not to clutch, not to vanish either, to stand somewhere in the middle, steady. I think about that night outside the party, and I do not feel bitter now. It was a hard moment, yes, but it gave me a path. It showed me where the line was between care and control. It taught me to love without making myself small. It taught me to listen, even when the words rubbed like a rough cloth on tender skin. Sometimes I look back and I see myself at the gate with the cake under the towel. I see the string lights, the warm window, the joy I could hear and not enter. I see the scarf lifting at my neck, and I hear my husband's voice in my bones. Let the wind carry the heat from your chest. That night, I learned to let the wind carry not only heat, but also the need to be needed. Now I try to live with open hands. I do not grip the moments like I can stop time. I do not disappear from them either. I hold them gently and let them pass through like water in a clean glass. When the feelings rise, I name them. When they fall, I thank them for what they taught me. The picture in my mind today is simple. It is the same house as that night, but a different day. Afternoon light lies on the floor like a soft blanket. A kite pulls a thin line up in the sky, red against the blue. In my kitchen, the kettle hums, steady and kind. On the mat by my door, there are shoes, little ones and big ones. The door is open, not pushed, not forced. Simply open. I move between these two homes now with a new rhythm. I ask before I step in. I leave before I am too tired to be gracious. I come home and set the kettle on. The radio speaks in a calm voice. I sit with my tea and I am not empty. I am full of the ordinary and it is enough. If you are listening and you feel like I did, standing outside a door, holding something warm, not sure if you belong, please hear this from me. No one should be left outside a door, especially not in their own heart. We can learn to open that door for ourselves. We can say, I am allowed to take up space in my life. We can also let others take up space in theirs. Love needs room and words. Care is not control. Kindness is also boundary. I had to say these lines many times before I believed them. They are not sharp rules. They are soft guides. When I follow them, the day feels lighter and the wind feels close. I used to think love meant doing everything, being everywhere, fixing what I could see and what I could not. Now I think love means listening, asking, and sometimes stepping back to make room for someone else to try. It means letting a child hold the string while you stand nearby. It means making tea for yourself and trusting that being well in your own home is also a gift to the people you love. The house where I once stood outside still has its happy sounds. I hear them now from an open door and sometimes from a phone call and sometimes from memory. The sound of a spoon on a bowl, a small voice asking for grandma cake, the low music that makes shoulders sway. These sounds come and go. The kettle in my kitchen keeps its faithful song. I want to send you off with something gentle. Hold the people you love with gentle hands. Speak softly and clearly too, so your care does not need to hide in actions that confuse. Forgive yourself for learning late. Many of us do. What matters is that we are learning. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Thank you for being kind listeners, like friends at a table with warm cups between us. I hope the wind meets you kindly at your door tonight. I hope your heart feels open and steady and at home. Sleep well, dear ones. May your night be peaceful and your morning light be soft.